Okay, and with that, we will call to order the meeting of the West Hollywood Planning Commission of Thursday, August 3rd, 2017. John Kehoe, do you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. And with that, we will move on to item 3, which is a special order of business. Item 3A is the election of the new chair for the coming year for the Planning Commission. And with that, I would like to nominate Vice Chair Buckner to be our next chair.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, there you go. Hold on, so let's go ahead. Do we have a motion on here?
No, you can do a
voice vote.
Voice vote.
Okay. With that, can we call the question? Well, should we just do it? Are there any other nominations? Sorry. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Nay. Aye.
Aye. Thank
Any
you.
opposed? No.
Thank
and
you.
with that, Chair Buckner, you are our new chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I accept it with great honor, and I'm looking forward to a really good year. We've got a lot on our agenda each week. I'm going to go. I just want to say thank you. And then we're going to do, next is the election of vice chair.
I nominate Stacy Jones.
Second that. Any further?
Call for the question.
All
in favor? Is there any other nominations? No.
Nope.
Seeing none, then we'll call for the vote, and we'll have a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, I congratulate you, Stacy. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to serving you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we move seats? Is that how that works? Next meeting? Okay.
Yeah, we're not moving seats because our audio-visual people have got us all set up for voting and everything. So next week we'll be taking different positions. But for tonight, we're going to stay where we are. Thank you very much. Next is the roll call. David?
Thank you. Good evening. Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Present.
Commissioner Cavallero? Here. Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Elchel?
Here.
Commissioner Guy?
Here.
Vice Chair Jones?
Here.
Chair Buckner?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 5 is the approval of the agenda for tonight. I'm asking Planning Commission to approve that. Is there a motion for approval?
I move approval.
It's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Hoopenegger. We'll have vote.
The agenda is approved, unanimous.
Thank you. The next item is approval of the minutes of the meeting of July 20th, 2017. Is there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Chair, staff has one correction on page 8. We just want to change the one word frontage in the first paragraph to the word, we just want to delete that and make it streets.
Make it streets.
Yeah, so it'll read, Commissioner Hoopengarner requested art on construction fencing to be on all commercial and residential streets.
Thank you. That's a good comment. Thank you for picking that up. Do we have any other additions? With that change and addition, a correction, can anybody move approval of minutes?
Move approval. It's already done.
Okay, thank you. Take me a while to catch up
And
here.
minutes are approved as amended.
Thank you. And now we move on to item number 7, public comment.
No public comment.
We have no members of the public who are wishing to speak at this time, but if there are people out there who want to, please take a speaker slip for the public comment at the end of our meeting. Next is director's report. Thank you. John.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. I just have 2 brief updates on 2 items that are on the next City Council agenda that might be of interest to you. Item 4B on the council agenda is the Capital and Special Projects Program update. So that's going to be an update that the council will discuss capital projects such as the West Hollywood Park, Laurel Park, and other project at Santa Monica and Crescent Heights, and just talk about what's the right order to do all of those projects. Another item is an update and presentation on community choice energy programs, and that's a program that allows the city, if we choose to join into this program to obtain clean energy for the city rather than staying with the current energy providers that we have. So there'll be presentations by 2 proposals, so that might be interesting to people to tune into on Monday night. Thank you very much.
Do any of our commissioners have any questions for our director? Thank you, John. Next is items from commissioners. Anybody want to speak at this time?
Yes.
Okay, Lynn, thank you.
I would like to request from staff that all future developments and the plans that we're submitted include renderings from all angles. In particular, the designs that we're looking at this evening has only got a sort of watercolor rendering from the front, and there are no renderings at all of any of the other sides of the building. So I think in order to understand fully what this building is going to look like in the context of the neighborhood, we should make sure that that's part of every plan that we review. I'd also request that all of these development proposals explicitly state in the staff report that we are in compliance with all state laws, not just our local zoning. In particular on this job, which we'll talk about later this evening, I'm concerned about the net zero issues with the property to the north, and I want to make sure that we comply with state law at all times. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any difficulty, or is there any reason why we can't request the developer? I guess the developers are the one who do the renderings and submit the drawings. Is there any issue with that? Thank you.
I don't believe so. We can request that they provide renderings of all 4 sides of a building.
However, there's no penalty if they don't. It's to their advantage to do it, I would imagine.
Certainly.
Thank
yes.
you. All right. Thank you. Now the next is a, anybody else? Excuse me. Oh, we got Rogerio? No? Stacy?
Yeah, I actually would like to make a request following our CEQA training at the last meeting, which was actually really helpful. I think it would be incredibly helpful just for public benefit and for everyone on the commission as it stands now, kind of in our newest iteration, to receive just kind of some training to discuss kind of the purview of the Planning Commission, maybe a little bit of case law. Stuff really gets me excited. But I think some legal parameters on which maybe some guardrails on which we should be considering projects. I think that would be incredibly helpful. It doesn't have to be long, but I think that would be super helpful for us and for people who come to the meetings as well.
Thank you, Stacy. I was going to make the same request that be agendized at some future meeting, so ask staff to consider that sometime in the near future. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, David?
I just wanted to thank everybody for the last year. It was a lot of fun, and congratulations to our new chair and vice chair.
Thank you. We enjoyed having you as our chair, too. Thank you so much. Move on to public hearings. First item is 11A. It's 8500 Sunset Boulevard, West Tower. This item was continued from an earlier Planning Commission meeting of July 20th, 2017. And at this time, I'd like to remind, yes?
Can I ask a question of staff?
Yes, you may.
Lauren, there's been a continuing issue with the noticing on this item. Could you bring us up to date on the current status?
Sure. If you remember, this item was scheduled for your last Planning Commission agenda on July 20th. And there was a typo, I believe, as to the address in that public notice. So the item was continued to a date certain, which was today. Staff sent out a second public notice notifying the public of the public hearing tonight. And that public notice didn't update the date. So it said the correct address. It didn't say August 3rd. It still said July 20th. So staff sent out a third public notice to everyone in 500 feet and everyone on the list to receive notice with the correct date and the correct address, and that went out last week.
But apparently, a lot of people didn't get it. So therefore, and it is not first class, so it's not unusual that a lot of people didn't get it. So since a lot of people didn't get it, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
I've seen an affidavit from the planning department that it went out to, I think, about 1,500 people. It's always within the planning commission's discretion to continue a hearing if you're uncomfortable and feel that enough people didn't receive notice of the hearing.
When did the notice actually go out?
The corrected notice went out on the 27th, I believe.
It was a Friday.
Corrected.
Friday, the third notice.
Corrected.
So does that meet the 10-day notice period?
No, but it was noticed as I have a copy here, a corrected public notice. So the two of those together, one corrects the other. It substantially complies with the notice requirement. If the commission is concerned that people didn't receive enough notice, it's within your purview to continue it.
So the third corrected notice was mailed on the 27th?
Correct, and if you read them together, they'll show you the correct date, the correct address, and it says in bright yellow, you corrected public notice.
But it not being first class, of the people that were questioned here on the commission, only one that I heard got the notice, and we get them all. So I don't believe.
In point of fact, I did not get my notice.
You didn't get it either.
I did.
That's two.
I got one. 3. Any comments from the commissioners on this
Well,
issue?
I think we could maybe take a straw vote as to see who is ready to accept it as proper notice and see how many are not.
Before we do that, I think in some ways, the question is whether they actually got notice of the corrected date, not whether it complies so much with the law, because we're always concerned about making sure that our public knows when to appear if they have an issue with a particular item.
Yes, that is the issue.
Yeah.
Whether they got notice, and
Right.
a lot of people did not.
Right. So I'm just voicing my concern. We can take a straw vote. How many of you feel we should be continuing this for another date so that we can properly notice additionally? Can we put hands up so I can see you guys? Okay. I think then that on my own motion, I would move that we continue it to a date that might work with the developer.
Steph's going to look at the calendar real quickly.
When is that?
Which
Is it possible maybe even to put it on the next meeting?
yes, that would be continuing it to a date certain of August 17th, 2017. I just got
Is
a
that
head
okay?
nod.
The sooner the better, I think. I hate to have you guys waiting again, but let's get the notice out in good time this time. We've got at least more than 10 days to do it, so let's do
And
that.
I hope the applicant team, appreciates that, we're trying to make sure that everybody who should be noticed is noticed and has an opportunity to be here. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you please come up to the podium? Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll get this straight pretty soon, David.
Hi. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. The only request that we would make, if it's coming before us, before you August 17th, that would be great. We would like to, since this is the third time, we would like to maybe have, first position on this. We don't think this is going to have a great deal of comment from anybody.
You'd like to be agendized as the first item?
Yes.
All right, well, if staff can arrange that, then they will. If not,
Thank you.
thank you for your request.
We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, guys.
No problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on now to item 11B. This is,
Excuse me, Chair, do you want to take a motion and a vote just to continue
yeah,
to 17th?
thank you.
Thank
Thanks for the reminder. I'll get the procedure down.
I move that we continue as to the 17th and make extra certain that we notice it expeditiously and accurately.
I second.
Can you tap motion?
I did.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, what are they speaking on?
There we go.
Mine worked.
All right. There we go.
Thank you. It looks like the motion has carried for the continuance to August 17th. Those of you in the audience, public, who came to speak on that item, we welcome you to stay. If not, be sure to mark your calendars for the 17th, and we'll move on to item 11B, 9001 Santa Monica Boulevard. And we have a staff
Oh,
report.
it's been continued.
What, this one? Oh my gosh, yes. Continued to a date uncertain. Sorry about that, thank you. Is there any, we have to have a vote on that? It's been recommended? No? Okay.
Oh,
It's a recommendation. Don't we vote on it?
do we have to vote on a continuance?
It's an itemized item.
I don't think so.
You can. There's no staff report in your packet to function on it anyway, but the formal way would be to make a motion in a second.
Okay.
Let's make
I'll
it.
make the motion. Okay, great. Thank you.
And motion to continue a date uncertain is carried. Going on to the next item, which is 11C, 1136 to 1142 North La Cienega Boulevard. We have a staff report. Lori, thank you for being here.
Good evening, Commissioners. Before you tonight is a request to demolish 2 single-family dwelling units on 2 adjacent parcels and construct a new 5-story, 23-unit condo building with 4 affordable units over subterranean parking. The project is located in a high-density, multifamily residential zone. The proposed project utilizes 2 affordable housing concessions based on their providing affordable housing on site and a 10% modification for a reduction in the rear yard setback. The proposed project is located on La Cienega, north of Holloway Drive and south of Fountain Avenue, and is developed with primarily multi-story, multifamily residential dwellings. There's an 11-story multifamily residential building directly across the street and a 3-story multifamily residential building to the north of the subject property that is approximately 53 feet in height on a sloped property. In January, a neighborhood meeting was held to present the proposed project with the neighbors. Neighbors had concerns regarding the proposed height, scale, and massing of the building, as well as concerns related to privacy. There was an expressed desire to see additional affordable housing. Additionally, there were concerns about traffic along La Cienega. Based on the city's threshold, the traffic associated with the proposed project does not exceed the city's impact threshold, and no further traffic analysis was required. Since the neighborhood meeting, the project has been revised to incorporate feedback from multiple individual group meetings with neighbors by the applicant to answer questions and mitigate concerns. Exhibit E in the packet outlines the concerns of each of the groups and how the applicant team responded to and mitigated those concerns, of which were incorporated into the conditions of approval in the draft resolution. There are 5 one-bedroom units in the project and 18 two-bedroom units. Parking is provided within a subterranean parking garage for each unit. The applicant has provided 10 non-required parking spaces. The proposed project is designed to meet the affordable housing requirement and concessions set forth in the municipal code. These standards are intended to encourage the production of low and moderate income housing and housing for disabled and older residents, which is integrated, compatible with, and complements adjacent uses and is located near public and commercial services. The project consists of a condominium building which incorporates affordable housing units on site. In this case, a proposed project with a base density of 18 units requires 4 additional affordable housing units. 2 are moderate and 2 are low income units. In exchange for providing on-site affordable units, the proposed project qualifies for two affordable housing concessions. The applicant requested to allow an additional story not to exceed 10 feet in total project height, which would be the 5th floor, and an exemption from the required 6-foot front building step back for the 2nd through 5th floors. The intent of this requirement is to encourage high-quality design buildings with modulation, and this building design, though it doesn't meet the letter of the law, meets the intent of the code requirement. The entire building is set back 14.5 feet from the front property line. Staff supports the requested concessions as the building is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, and the building design, though not stepped back in front on the 2nd through 5th floors, is modulated in other ways and incorporates a unique building design. The applicant also requests a 10% modification to the rear yard setback, which is from 15 feet to 13.5 feet. The required rear yard setback for multifamily residential buildings is 15 feet. The applicant is requesting a reduced rear yard setback for a portion of the rear of the building. Approximately 225 square feet of building area encroaches into the required setback. Staff finds that the 10% modification for a portion of the rear yard setback is not reasonable or justifiable to reduce the rear yard setback by 1.5 feet. But given the lot size configuration of the building and generous south side yard setback, the building may be slightly adjusted in order to maintain the required 15-foot rear yard setback, which serves as a buffer between the subject property and the adjacent properties to the east along Hacienda Place. Therefore, staff does not support this modification. I printed out an email that was submitted as part of Exhibit F earlier, where the second page did not print, so that remainder of that email was provided to you earlier this evening. That concludes my presentation. Staff and the applicant are available for any questions you may have.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner
Jennifer? Oh, Lori, sorry. What is the building to the rear? Is it one building or more?
It's actually 3 buildings along Hacienda that are adjacent to the 2 subject properties.
And are they residential?
They are residential, multifamily.
And do they have windows or that are facing the...
They do. In one of the neighborhood meeting that the applicant had with the neighbors to the east, one of their concerns was privacy, and so all of the openings on the east side of the building facing their property have privacy screening along each opening for privacy, to mitigate privacy. That's also a condition in the resolution.
Thank you.
Any other comments of staff at this point or questions before we hear from the applicant? No?
I think my questions can be answered by the applicant.
Thank you. We'll have the applicant come to the microphone, and I understand that you have a 10-minute presentation initially. Then we'll have 2 minutes for the public to address the issues, and then you can come back for rebuttal. 5 minutes.
Okay.
Will you state your name and your city of residence, please?
I will indeed. My name is Lorcan O'Herlihy, principal of Lorcan O'Herlihy Architects. A pleasure to be here today.
Thank you.
Let me just get this going here. There we go. So we're starting with these primary images of the site. This shows the different views from the North La Cienega. North view shows south view, the northwest La Cienega north view as well. So this shows the density and the scale of our adjacent properties that we're in our context of where we're in. More views showing the west view on the top left, all the way down to, as we go through the sites, the one on the bottom left looks at the east view from our property. And the bottom right one looks at the southwest view on La Cienega Boulevard. So that shows the different variety of types of context and the layers of buildings that surround our properties. This is looking at the vicinity map and shows the context of the relationship to La Cienega, Fountain Avenue, all the way up to Sunset Boulevard. With regards to the site plan, this is again looking at the general idea of what's surrounding us, equally looking at height. The height limit is 55 feet as per SB 1818, and the allowable floors are 5 stories again. with regards to SB 1818. This image is looking at our project site. So this is without anything, and again, showing the massing of the buildings surrounding it. So that's a comparison to those criteria. This is looking at the allowable massing diagram that we can do with regards to the size of the building. So this looks at the typical courtyard housing typology. This is important to remember because we really wanted to address this and refine and bounce against this and push against the concept of the big box here with regards to the building. This starts to look at the shifting massing that we started to develop. So this generates a more extroverted open space, reducing the mass and providing porosity at street frontage, which is very important. Our work is all about trying to create this generosity of the sidewalk, expanding the bandwidth, so to speak, so that's more generous, and that's extremely important to all of our projects. So this was the criteria that we pushed this idea with this project. This again shows the further articulation of massing, again pushing away from the convention, but become a little bit more dynamic, sticking to the spirit of West Hollywood's creative city. This is also responding to adjacent neighborhood buildings as well. So the nature of the building, the massing was responding to that as well. So you can see that there's a inverted concept as opposed to the courtyard housing where you put all the massing on the perimeter and put the common open space in the middle. We wanted to push it to the edge and create a generous space, in effect, a quasi-common open space, but has that spirit of open space. And that was extremely important to our project. You can see that this is the extended setbacks that we provided on the ground level. And this also talks about the void spaces, the open spaces. So this provides additional relief on all sides of the projects. So you can see in the blue, the nature of the blue represents, the box represents what we could have done within the building massing. And you can see through it, which is the actual size of the building. So again, carving away strategic voids throughout the building so that you have this porosity and generosity and uniqueness to the design of the project. Also, the view corridor is important, knowing that with regards to the adjacent buildings. This does allow view corridors, so the building is oriented to provide contextual viewpoints from the neighboring buildings. That was something that we also use. So what we do when we design buildings, we try to look at the adjacent buildings and say, okay, how can we manipulate the building to respond accordingly? And that's what we bring to all of our projects, and that was what we wanted to bring from this viewpoint as well. And privacy and noise was important, so the noise reduction was tackled by providing and positioning the common private open space at the center of the site and not at the edges. One doesn't want people to be able to push right to the edge to look over at the neighboring property, so we push it towards the density, towards of the open space, towards the center of the building. You can see in this diagram in terms of the landscaping. And here's a view from the street perspective, again showing the stepped massing of the building, again playing off and pushing against the convention of buildings that tend to be large boxes. So the articulation is in the building as opposed to articulation as some treatment ornament in the building. We felt that the building has this opportunity to tackle that idea. And here's another rendering of the street perspective. Again, zooming in, you can see from the street level there's a generosity of space as you come past the building, and then there's a gate there pushed back further. We didn't build the fence right at the property line, we pushed it back. So again, there's more of a generosity, and that's extremely important in the cities of Los Angeles. This is something that we think is important to all buildings, that you have that level of generosity and porosity at that street level. And this is the view with the trees. So this is without, or kind of a transparency of the trees, and that's how it'll actually be with regards to the density of the landscaping with the building. So again, there's a layered effect to it, as you can see. This is a zoom into the entry perspective. And this is not, you don't see these very often in Los Angeles, and we felt it was very strong to have this nature, the quality of the space on this building. Here's looking at the different exterior finishes. We have a mesh, stainless steel mesh guardrail, we have white concrete, we have pavers, and we have windows, of course. There's a white aluminum panel, but with that we also have the perforated aluminum panels and additional larger holes of perforated aluminum panels. What's nice about that is you can see in the far right, or top right image, you can begin to see layers to it. So that's how we refine the materials, not to having 3 or 4 or 5 different materials, but one material, but play with that material and explore that idea that you can change the nature of the building by changing the nature of how you make and fabricate that material. So that's really an exciting way of really addressing materiality. And here's previous precedent buildings we've done without the City of Los Angeles, and of course I've done metal buildings in West Hollywood as well. Again, this is looking at the different processes. So this represents all the different type of white perforated aluminum panels, the quarter-inch round, a 3/8 round, and then the solid aluminum panels. So again, you start to see that articulation. This looks at the cross-section, which talks about the idea of passive design strategies that we push with our projects. So all the units are going to be accessed from the exterior, so you can conceivably open a window at one end of your unit and have the air filter all the way through. So this is something we drive with our work, is passive design strategies, and try to push this idea that we don't want to have conditioned whole corridors in the middle of buildings. It tends to deaden the quality of the buildings, where this brings a much nicer, more livelier way to look at these buildings. This is the front yard setback we're looking at here. We talked briefly about that, I think Lori did earlier. So we are addressing on the front part, at the ground level, we have the 14'6". As we go up the building, we start to see that we do have the 6-foot setback towards the front of the building. So from right to left is ground floor plan, all the way up to the top floor is on the left-hand side. And this is looking at the rear elevation opening study. So we looked at the building behind us. The only area that we overlap in terms of window, as you can see, the red line is somewhat difficult to read. The red line represents the adjacent building. So there's only one overlap with one window, which is the top right-hand corner. And we will certainly screen it as an example of A. So where this does happen, we will really address that issue so that there is a sense of privacy to the neighbors behind. And we've made efforts to, and we met with all the neighbors in the buildings that are adjacent as well. So we've met all the neighboring properties. Again, in the rear yard setback, again talks about the setback. I think Lori spoke about this, so we can talk about this if you have questions about it. So this is repeated information. And the floor plans. Parking below, needless to say, parking level 2, parking level 1, and here are the floor plans as you go from ground level above. Again, richness of landscape and building working together on this project. And floor level 2, access from the exterior. We also expanded the bandwidth of the walkways so people can come out and sit there as well. So there's a quality there, so you have some private common open space as well, which is nice. It's not just a corridor, it's not just an outdoor corridor, it's a place where you begin to engage and gather and you can chat. And that's extremely important to these buildings. So it brings life, activity to these buildings. It's very important to have that. And the floor levels as we go up. Needless to say, you can see in the design of the buildings, we're creating access to the top, the front, to the back of the units so that you can open windows on one side and bring the light all the way through and air. Level 4. Level 5. And this is the roof deck. With regards to the roof deck, we felt it was extremely important to limit the 42 inches in terms of projections. So we've kept all projections into the roof to 42 inches. So there's no roof, the elevator doesn't go to the roof. So it doesn't go there.
Thank you.
In closing, the roof coverage is limited to less than 15% as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You'll have it.
John has a question.
John, excuse me. We want to stay at the podium in case there's questions from commissioners. Thank you.
Mr. Louis, before you construct or do any building construction on this site, you're dealing with empty land, right?
No.
You will have demolished whatever is there.
Yeah.
So you're dealing basically with empty land. So why is it you need the rear setback modification?
Elevator, there's aspects of the building that would help us to mediate that concern. So we were looking at different components. That was the reason. But the setback, you're talking about the front or back?
Back.
You're asking for a modification of the rear setback.
Yeah, I think that you spoke about that earlier, right?
No, I'm asking you.
Yeah.
You're the one that's
well,
asking.
Well, in terms of the design, in terms of the,
not
sorry,
asking for it, but
the terms of the design was, it was important to get the distances we needed to make it
what about
work.
the distance they need? What about their rights statutorily for open space?
forgive me, air rights to the neighboring property you're referring to?
No, they have a statutory right to the setback.
My hearing is terrible, John, I'm so
Sorry.
sorry. Can
They
you
s-
speak into the microphone? So it's my hearing, it's not yours.
Yes, Jean. My point is, they have an absolute right by statute
Yes.
to open space on the setback. What is your necessity to take that away from them?
Well, I'm again, it's the same, Ian, you can.
It's something to monetize your project?
Yeah, it was with regards to the circulation. John, come out here. Come up here.
Come on up.
Ian Dickinson from Lorcan O'Hurley Architects. What we did is through the process of working with the neighbors, we wanted to adjust that rear setback so it was the most generous it could be at the areas that would be the most effective.
Generous to you, but the statute gives them a certain amount.
So
per-
what we had
per
done is
statute.
The building, so we pushed it away from theirs, but it meant in terms of the nature, when I said we needed the space for the unit, then it extended over. So it was more about working with the neighbors, as I mentioned.
Working with the neighbors that you're taking away a foot and a half?
They were happy with it, so.
They're happy with it?
There's windows at the rear property that has the closest lot line to us at the rear. And so what we did is we pivoted that portion of the building away, which meant this portion of the building pivoted out slightly.
Well, I understand what you're doing, but what your thought process is, but you're also taking away a foot and a half of their open space. What is the absolute necessity for that?
In other
It was
words,
to create space for them in terms of where it was location. We
How can it be
pivoted.
creating space for them if you're
Because we have
taking
a
away
more
a foot
generous
and a...
setback
It's a
where
more
it's
generous
against their
setback
windows.
is where their windows are. So we took a flat wall, the windows here, we pushed our building back to give them more space. By pushing it this way, then we tweaked this way. And again, it's
I
just
see.
a request for modification, but in talking to them, they were interested in having a little bit more space. So if you look at flat surface and there's your setback, we gave a greater setback, allow more airspace where the windows are, and then we tweaked the building that way. That is the purpose of it.
I see, all right, well,
That's why I was saying we needed it
that
for the
is
space.
an explanation,
Okay.
but I'll leave it to everybody else to decide whether it's a legitimate.
Yeah.
Is that,
with
is that
regard
your
to,
understanding, Lori?
I'm sorry, say that
Is that
again?
your understanding of the reason?
It's the first I've heard of that reasoning.
How was it told to you?
There wasn't really a reason.
Can I ask a question?
Forgive me, a lot of the moves we made was also, as I mentioned, by letting the building, responding to the buildings around. So if there was a question or a query from the neighbor, we managed to manipulate the building to respond to that. And that's why I said that the building is, in a sense, trying to respond to those things. That's where the shape and geometry was, those. Even the view corridor was based on providing those. So in a sense, the building is a response, as I mentioned, to the buildings around it. So there are a lot of tweaks to it, but it's more of that dynamic. So that's what's trying to
I'm
do.
having a hard time
Okay.
understanding how you're getting more space by encroaching on the property's back. And did the
you wanna go to
property
that
move
drawing, or-
further away, like 17 feet away at some point? So that now when you needed to go closer?
The
it's-
setback was 15, we go 17 back in one end, and we're going to 13 in the other. So we're tweaking the building, so where the greater distance is where their windows are. That was the principle behind it. And the form of the building is responding to that. That's why the geometry is the way it is.
So the building isn't 13.6 feet away all the way across the back?
No, it's tweaked, yes. It's a greater distance where the windows are so that you have more airspace. That was the purpose of
I think what he's saying
it.
is there's an average, and the average
Yeah.
ends up to be plus or minus 15.
So the sum of the
Fine, let's
open...
take a flat, and you're pushing this way a little bit closer, but pushing away here.
Okay, thank
And
you.
they seem to be reasonable with it. I believe that was the comment. So
The sum of the open space
is equal to the setback,
is
yes.
equal to the statutory requirement?
In principle, yes, very close to
No,
it.
I mean in actuality.
In actuality, it could very well be. Are we actually pretty? Yes, we will make it actual. Again, the numbers might be inches off, but primarily you take a flat line, you push this way to make a greater distance from the neighbor's window, and then that tweaks this way. So it's the same principle as if you were to
So
balance.
you are amenable to a concession, to
Yeah.
something in the entitlement, that says that the open space will be equal.
Equal to it,
to
yes.
what is
The open space will,
statutorily-
exactly.
To what is
exactly.
statutorily required.
We did it because the windows were there, that's all. We didn't say, here's the setback. We said, okay, well, we'll address it.
Now I understand what you thought.
Forgive me, I was saying those comments were from response to the neighbors, and that's why they liked the idea of the greater depth, distance from their windows at that point.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question for staff. So, is the applicant entitled to asking for a concession of modifying setbacks in this scenario?
He's entitled to ask for a 10% modification and,
Which is what they've asked for.
yes.
And then a question for the applicant.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can get this drawing up in a hurry, but the way I understand it, microphone. It's page A0.6.1, please. Oh, there it is. So the way I understand it is as you go up, with each story, it seems as though it's...
Yes.
So this is in response to the build... Sorry, I should clarify for the record. So the building shifts to kind of respond to the building to the
Yes.
east. So was any special attention given to or sensitivity with respect to... Is the concept behind it privacy or kind of responding to the massing? Like what was the thought process as to averaging it this way as opposed to having a flat back at 15?
It was just some feedback we had from the neighbors, and we felt like, well, also formally, we like the buildings to respond to forces on it, so that leads to a more inventive building. So logic is also, there's a fold into architectural design strategies equal to feedback we had. Yes.
Understood. Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any
other comments?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a couple questions for the architect. The staff report refers to a passive water collection system, and
Yes.
I was curious as to where that was on the plans. I couldn't find it.
Right. We have on the roof, what we have is we have a collection and reuse system for rainwater. So what happens primarily is the water falls on the roof, we have gutters that bring it down, and that's how we use it. So that's the system we're using. On the roof, of course, the rain hits it, but all the water that comes on the roof, we're collecting it and bringing it down, and it's being used for reuse.
So do you have a cistern, or I couldn't see
Well,
any
we're at
schematics
collection
right
now.
any collection device?
We're going to
in the
develop that's the
plans?
principle what we're doing. We're going to develop it, obviously, through design development and CDs. That is a given. We're going to have that. We just haven't designed it yet.
Okay.
It's all there.
Okay. I'm looking at page 18 and 19 of the renderings and the images, and I'm perplexed as to how what appears to be the exact same street view is completely different.
Can we bring those up here?
So if you look at page 18, there's a young man standing in the front, appears to be standing on the sidewalk across the street. And if you turn the page to 19, it appears to be from the exact same place on the sidewalk across the street, and yet the building is significantly larger, different. The whole perspective is substantially different. So I'm really confused as to
I'd
the
have to see
rendering.
them. There's no deviation. They're the same, so we just have to see it. Those are the,
One's a
yeah, there we
close-up
go.
and one's
They're
more
identical.
distant. Just a different spot and...
Well, it seems to be in exactly the same spot. It's
No.
right across the street.
No, it's not.
No.
Okay,
Page 19 is closer than page 18.
Rest assured,
and then
it's the same
page
building.
20 is the same?
One is even closer, it looks like.
Now, I just want to clarify that the first floor units are the affordable housing units?
Yes, I believe so. That's the case.
Because I
Have
was
we-
curious as to why there were no stoves in the affordable housing units.
Right, we're complying with, of course, the requirements. I don't think we've selected the location yet, have we? No, we haven't selected them yet.
Okay, because the first floor units had sinks but no stoves. And so that just seemed,
No, we haven't selected them yet.
okay.
I'm sure when they do plan check, they'll make sure it's in there. Okay. No other questions of the developer at this point? Thank you. You'll have another chance to address us when
Sure,
you do the
absolutely.
rebuttal. I believe
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have several people from the public.
Thank you, Larkin.
That want to address the commission on this particular item. If there's any other people who haven't already given speaker slips, please give them to our secretary. You each have 2 minutes to speak. And would you please state your name and city of residence when you come before our commission? First person is Lisa Pepino, followed by Jeffrey Hobgood.
Hi, my name's Lisa Pepino, and I live in West Hollywood. I live at 1155 North La Cienega. I'm across the street from the property, and I have grave concern about the misrepresentation of page 6, paragraph 3 and 4. A lot of that's not true. I was at the meeting. We had one neighborhood meeting, and they're saying they had a letter requesting feedback or another meeting. We never had that. It's saying here the neighbors were pleased with the outcome, and that's not true. We have 177 units in my building, and there's not one person in my building that's pleased with the project. You know, when we were at the meeting, we were concerned because there was benches. We were concerned about the homeless people, you know, sitting in the front, and, you know, we didn't think it was good. And he promised that he would remove them. But then he puts a picture up, and there's like 4 benches up there. And the other problem was the sun reflecting off the aluminum siding, which he said he was going to fix, but apparently today it's the same. So I'm not quite sure what he's planning. We weren't told about a lot of this. I just request that you continue this until all the neighbors in the neighborhood are talked to, like, properly. I didn't even know this meeting was here. Like, I had to email her because it was very confusing. There was like a correction notice. I'm like, is that for that property or this? I get like 6 notices in the mail because of Sunset, and I'm getting all these notices. I don't know what's what or what's going on. And there was like 100 people at that neighborhood meeting, and there's like nobody here. So I was just worried.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thanks.
Next, Jeffrey Hogwood, followed by Joyce Hoftel.
Heftel.
Hi, thanks for allowing me to speak tonight. First of all, I want to start off by saying I'm a huge proponent.
Jeff, I know I said your name, but it's
required
to say
Jeffrey
your name.
Hobgood, local resident, West Hollywood, California, local real estate agent, West Hollywood. And I want to start off with thanking you, but also saying that I'm a huge proponent of developments here in West Hollywood in the progression of the city. Also of the architect who's doing this project. I think he's a great architect, but I'm here to represent my clients who are very concerned about the height of this structure, because it's like one of the only ones I know of in West Hollywood that's over 4 stories. So they're very concerned about this. I have clients here that are directly affected by the height of this building. So I don't understand why it had to be 5 stories as opposed to 4. That's a huge concern to local neighbors. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Joyce Hoftel, followed by Gary Wires.
Hi, Joyce Heftel, West Hollywood, and I live right by there. My first comment is that rendering with all those pretty flowers and stuff in front of the building, that's got to be a fantasy because it's right at the curb and that sidewalk's like this. So I think that's a misrepresentation of a picture. 23 units going in where 2 houses are, that's really a big concern. The 5th floor is really a big concern. 10 extra parking spaces, they said, but do the 1-bedrooms have 1 parking spot and 2 people living there? I don't think parking is going to be a big issue. La Cienega parking is going to be a big issue. Going around the corner to Fountain where I live is going to be a big issue. Where's the driveway? Where are they coming out? They said letter of the law. It meets the idea, not the letter. Well, with everything going on here, the letter of the law has to be an issue here and not ideas, because I've been here in West Hollywood a long time, as some of you know, and too many not letter of the laws have been accepted. I mean, it's the sidewalks narrow. I don't think they're going to end up having enough parking, and that's just going to impact the rest of the neighborhood where we don't have enough parking right now. And we've got to deal with what's going to happen on Sunset from Olive all the way to Fountain. It's just 2 houses, now 23 units. It's too much, and there won't be enough parking. And get rid of the 5th floor and let the people who live here enjoy living here. And I'm sorry, the developers who come here, make their money, and live someplace else shouldn't make our lives worse. And that's what keeps happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Gary Wares, followed by Mark Jackson.
Hello, hi, I'm not counting with this. My name is Gary Wares.
Gary,
my name is Gary Wares. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm very concerned because I really don't understand what's going on. I mean, I know it sounds kind of ignorant, but I believe I've been deceived. I mean, I signed a contract with someone to live there. Like, I have keys to that place, and I've talked to the sheriffs and everything, and they've told me that just to produce a contract, but they've told me I need to move out, but they haven't told me a date. No one's telling me anything. I don't understand what's going on, and I don't know who owns the property, because it's evidently not the person who I was led to believe it is. And I was told this is like this is going to last 18 months or something before they took it down, and that I would be able to renew this lease with these people 6 months at a time. Like, there's not just me, there's a bunch of us. They just asked me to come and speak for them.
Are you talking about, do you have...
The people who are staying at this location right now.
You mean at that address in one of those
yes,
houses?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Well, this would take a long time, probably more than 18 months before they develop it.
But I'm saying, like, I just moved there. A lot of us just moved there, and someone there is being said to be the manager. And I mean, if I'm not supposed to be there, I need to know this. I want my money back, and I want to not be in trouble. You know what I mean?
That sounds like something you might want to take up with
I don't know who to speak to.
The rent department at City Hall.
At City Hall?
Mm-hmm. You go
okay,
talk to
so
them.
As of now, so just go there with my rental
because we only deal with land use issues here. We're not dealing with those.
I just didn't know where to go, and this was what was on the sign.
Yeah,
and I
go to City Hall.
I didn't initially read the sign because I didn't have no reason to. You know what I mean? It's at the house next door, and I didn't look at it.
Thank you.
You'll
be able to bring it up there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You said rental department, City Hall. You guys have a great night.
Right.
Suites are in Santa Monica, not at Los Angeles City Hall.
Yeah. Right, on Santa Monica Boulevard. Okay, next is Mark Jackson, followed by Matt Durbin.
Good evening. My name is Mark Jackson. I live at 1137 Hacienda in West Hollywood. I'm actually on the east, directly on the east side of this building. The HOA in my building wants to bring up 4 conditions for approval. The first is in regards to the rear setback. So as you were discussing, we did initially have major concerns for the 10%. We were the ones who asked for a pivot and articulation on the southeast corner. From our perspective, it would be best that there is not an exception to the 10%, but if there is, if it is approved, that we do keep the redesign of the 3rd, 4th floors articulated, so that it is away from our building to the east of the corner. We're also asking to continue to have no balconies on the east side of the building. We also have major concerns for privacy, so we've asked the architects to move windows or to provide privacy films so that we're not looking at each other. Our building does have several balconies on that side of the building as well. We also have concerns for sound. Sound has been a problem from the tenants, from the current tenants of these two homes, along with Paley House. So with a rooftop deck, we're concerned with sound and would request for more sound mitigation. The last is a concern with dust. So we're asking for a condition of approval to have our balconies covered and also the west side of our building cleaned during points of construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Durbin, followed by Cynthia Blatt.
Good evening, Matt Dubin, West Hollywood. What none of the renderings show is the traffic in that neighborhood, and it is already on the verge of being untenable. I noticed in the report some of the tenant neighbor letters talking about this being one of the 3 worst intersections, and it is, and that's before we have Sunset Hotel and condos open. That's before we have Olive open, and that's before we start on another major construction project. And that's really my concern. There's just too much going on in this corridor without enough relief for car traffic. So I want to urge you guys to say no to this. Thank you.
Cynthia Blatt, now followed by Susan Lagudis. Lagudi.
Hi, Cynthia Blatt, West Hollywood. There's 2 things I wanted to say. First of all, I don't understand why the city allows developers to keep citing SB 1818 when it was amended in September 2014 by AB 2222 and which went into full implementation in January 2015, and since then has been amended several more times. So why in the world are developers still citing SB 1818, and why is the city allowing that? That's number 1. Number 2, in October 2008, city staff brought a memo to City Council saying that they wish to go from individual traffic studies to a statistical model based on looking at how projects would interact with each other. Several people, both in writing and speaking, have talked about the level of congestion on La Cienega, where it's impacted by Holloway, Santa Monica, Sunset, Fountain, where the lights are not synchronized, where traffic comes to an absolute standstill several times a day. And the moment that the City Council agreed to this memo to allow the city to go to a statistical model of traffic studying, the city then began immediately to ignore that and to determine traffic impacts in isolation, which is part of how we see this kind of obscene obstruction throughout the city because the traffic studies are done in isolation. This building will not have a singular impact. It will interact with all of the existing buildings in the area and the additional traffic brought down from Sunset, over from Fountain, up from Santa Monica, and up from Holloway. So how is it that not only are we citing a law that's been amended, and that seems to be acceptable, but we're also not paying attention to the actual traffic memo in October 2008 that gave the city the right to do statistical models? Why aren't they studying how these projects are interacting? Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Sorry?
Oh, do you have a question, Cynthia, when it comes?
No, I have a question of staff.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Lauren, is SB 1818 still the way it was with respect to the concessions and any other items?
Yes.
mentioned today?
When people refer to SB 1818, it's really the government code, section 65915. It's just sort of shorthand that people in West Hollywood have used for many years to refer to the density bonus program. That comes from state law, but it still exists. The incentive program is still in there. The density bonus program is still in there. Staff is going to be...
Except technically it has another number.
Yes. Staff's going to be bringing some updates soon to reflect the amendments in state law, but they apply the most recent state law when they process the projects if it's not already in the code.
This project complies with the most recent state law?
Yes.
And the sum of all those other sections?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. Susan? And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name.
Actually, it's Susana Lagudis.
Lagudis.
Okay. Yes. I live at 1124 North La Cienega, directly south of the proposed building. Directly, and I mean directly, 7 feet from the building being proposed. As somebody else that lives across the street mentioned, the claims here when they have Exhibit E has the neighborhood meeting concerns, and apparently the only concerns of residents in my building, which were basically myself and another resident, are just noise. Noise is a very big concern, and I would request that they are required to put up very large sound barriers while they're building this and also depress the dust. However, you have a letter from the other resident in my building who got involved, which as Exhibit F, which brings up traffic, noise, dust, and also, of course, the height and blocking completely our view, but we know that that doesn't really concern the planning department too much. I'm really concerned that the project has been allowed to move forward like this, even though the claim is that it does comply with all of the current laws, because just recently the city council did ask or directed actually the city attorney and the planning department to take another look at those list of incentives and not come back with a knee-jerk reaction, which we were told by staff in emails, that no, there was never a plan to make it smaller because they were allowed the 5th floor because they were going to have the affordable housing. So all of this makes me very concerned, and I would like to say exactly what my for my other homeowner who cannot be here tonight has to say. How much can one area of the city stand? When is enough enough? Please learn to say no to at least some of the developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jordan Surf was next. Thank you.
Hi, Commission. Jordan Surf, City West Hollywood. I feel like I'm on a TV set. I'm a neighbor to the north, and I've spoken extensively with Lori to understand some of the zoning laws and regulations and make sure that I'm up to speed and understand the nature of what's happening, and having spoken about the percentage of the lot in which they must build and the average square footage of a unit that they have to do. What I don't understand is if a building of this size of at least 10 units is required to have affordable housing, then why do they also get an incentive of including affordable housing, of using an exemption from one of the zoning laws, and in this choice of height is incongruous with the rest of the neighborhood. Yes, there is a large tower to the west. However, no other building looking around is more than 3 stories. So I think, the design has a lot of merits, and I applaud the architects for trying to do something creative and aesthetically pleasing as opposed to a big box. But the 5th floor isn't a necessity. It's a design choice. And, the variance in the rear, as they said, is not a necessity. It's a design choice. Putting the front steps, and I agree with the neighbor who spoke about the rendering being completely out of scale with the size of the sidewalk. I walk my dog around the block every morning. There is a proliferation of homeless, which, is another matter for a different part of the city council, but they're out on the streets and they're everywhere, and putting the steps and landscaping in front on the sidewalk, I think, is an invitation for more vagrants in the neighborhood. And I also have to echo everyone's concerns about traffic. I mean, right now there are 2 small buildings. There's about to be 23 units with 51 parking spots, and having to pull out and make a right onto La Cienega, as is the nature of the street where the driveway would be, is going to create a tremendous breach of traffic, especially during rush hour times. So I also disagree with the assessment on page 6 of the report that says that no complaints from neighbors have come through. That's just categorically false. As you heard, letters have been filed, discussions have been had, and there's major issues. So thank you.
Thank you. I believe there's some people who'd like to be mentioned as opposing but don't want to take a speaker slip.
That's correct. We just have one. Jordan Moblo opposes staff's recommendation of approval.
Okay, thank you. The applicant has an opportunity now to come forward and offer a rebuttal. You have 5 minutes. Two of you could speak as long as you divide the time.
With regards to the height, the early image showed the large mass of what we could have built. The building has been manipulated so that there's a lot of greater openness, and so the building doesn't represent as a large 4-story structure across. So that's why one of the reasons of the higher component, and that was the principle as opposed to have the conventional way of having a 4-story to accommodate the unit count. So this was a way of having more of a view corridor, more transparency, more openness. So that's why the building was designed this way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Just in regards to Lisa's questions, comments in regards to the meetings, we had a neighborhood meeting and then held individual meetings with each of the building owners that were adjacent, and we had 2 at the Tower Center, which she resides in. Correction in regards to the siding, it's not aluminum, it's aluminum, but it's painted white, so it's a finished aluminum.
You don't expect it to have reflection when the sun's...
No, and we've used this material in Los Angeles in the area before, and referenced that project and discussed that with the neighbors, and it seemed to some of the concerns are the concerns.
Did you guys use it on San Vicente?
San Vicente is a different material. It's a fiber cement board, but it's the same color.
Okay.
There's a project on Cloverdale that we did that we showed in the presentation as well that has a similar finished material that we haven't had any concerns or questions come up in regards to the reflection. In regards to Joyce and I believe Jordan that both brought up the sidewalk looking overly, we're required to provide an additional setback for future use, and so there is the requirement to have that walkway be widened, and so we are doing that, and the landscape is being represented as will exist in the project. I believe that the client would be happy to, of course, take any sort of construction mitigation strategies that are going to be requested in regards to noise and sound mitigation, as is consistent with other construction projects in West Hollywood. In regards to Mark's comment, there are no balconies on the east, and that was another reason that we were dealing with the rear setback. We wanted to be able to keep those away from that property line, so there will be no balconies on the east. And then, as discussed, there will be film for the windows for the openings to be able to, and also we've offset them so that there isn't any sort of direct view from one into another.
The other issues were about traffic. So primarily, most of we would try to do with the project is that where there was windows and other conditions, we responded to that accordingly, and that's what we're going to do on the project. So, thank you.
You still have more time if you want to address some issues. No?
If there's any questions.
Okay. Any questions of developer at this point? Seeing none, I guess we'll close the public hearing at this time. I'd like to take a 5-minute break so that we have a chance to take a look at the model, because I haven't had a chance. I don't think many of the commissioners have either. And I want to caution the public not to approach any of the commissioners at this time. We're not allowed to discuss the project, or we don't want to even be talking about anything that might look like we are. So thank you very much. Yeah, I do like it a lot. It's fancy. Where'd you get that? Yeah.
People are chewing on it.
It's like I went for a manicure today and they had. Everyone begin to take their seats so we can reconvene. Can I have the commissioners that are not here to come back? I thank the public for listening as carefully like you did. Thank you. Okay, then we're back on the record. We're opening the part of the hearing where the commissioners have an opportunity to discuss the item among ourselves and make comments. So who would like to go first? Okay, David, thank you.
First off, I want to thank the public for coming out and expressing your thoughts and concerns. As any other residential project that we see, there are two parts to this project. There's the zoning / legal component, which this project pretty much fits in the box neatly. The concessions they're asking for, in my opinion, are reasonable, and pursuant to SB 1818 and the applicable codes that they're taking advantage of, this project is in the box. As far as the other element of this, which is the design and the compatibility and the context, I think this is it's an exceptional project.
I think the design is very thoughtful. It's reactive to the context of where it's being built. I love playing with the different types of aluminum and different materials for the facade and the different transparencies. So I think it's, I'm inclined to support the project on that basis. And those are just generally my thoughts. If there's anyone else that wants to speak, Commissioner Altschul?
Commissioner.
Oh, sorry.
You get used to it.
You can put me in Siberia next week.
Okay, thank you. It's all right. We can use a little help.
I think the architecture is extraordinarily magnificent, as is everything that the O'Herlihy company does. I think O'Herlihy has, in a contemporary way, in modern times, put West Hollywood on the map architecturally, as like the PDC did back in 1970-something. It's not necessarily so that the people who are affected by the reduction of the request for modification of the setback are necessarily happy with it. And I think that would be a requirement in order to make it happen, that they do have a sense of total acceptance and a total like for it. And I don't think they do. So I would not be inclined to accept the need, the necessity for the modification on the setback. We have a local reporter that makes fun of the commission when they argue over 18 inches of whatever and take about an hour or half an hour to do it. But setbacks, I think, are sacrosanct and should be upheld as often as possible, because they're there for a reason. The code requires it. They are legislated. It's not something you can toy with or tweak at your convenience because you need an extra few inches to monetize your project. And I'm sure the applicant can do a little bit of a redesign and a tweak to make the setback unnecessary, not even consider it necessary. With respect to the concessions, we have our legislators, our senators, and our state assembly people to thank for the concessions and the incentives that are mostly given for affordable housing. When the state decrees that affordable housing is of utmost importance, and they pass and the governor signs legislation that allows these concessions and some incentives, also some that the city gives. But here we're talking about concessions pursuant to a state mandate. And that's exactly what it is. It is a state mandate to encourage affordable housing. True, we have our own affordable housing requirements that are much to the point of more stringent than other cities and other municipalities. But we are subject to what the state says you have to do. And therefore, the fifth floor, they're entitled to it by state law. And there's nothing really much that this commission can do about abrogating that, just as I feel there's nothing the commission can do or should do to abrogate the people in the rear's right to a small setback. That's their privacy, and it's sort of all we have to offer in a town of this density, is the setback requirements to create a little space between us and our neighborhoods. Otherwise, I totally agree with David that this is a sensational project.
Anybody else? Stacy, you want to comment?
Sure, I can comment. So I want to talk about the setback a little bit, and I'd like to hear from some of the other commissioners on this. I know Commissioner Altschul, you've spoken to this, and David, you didn't really mention it. It sounds like the residents of the HOA on Hacienda are okay with the rear setback as it is right now. I don't know that we heard from anyone else to the rear, did we?
I don't think
any particular
person took a speaking slip today.
Okay.
Tonight.
Okay. I mean, you know, I know that we're not always going to hear from everyone at these meetings. It's our, you know, I do want to thank the public for coming out because we do rely on you to, you know, express your thoughts and how this is going to impact your life. So we do appreciate you coming out. It is a chunk of your time, and we're here for you. That's why we're here. To Commissioner Guy's points, you know, one of the toughest things about being in the position that we're in is kind of grappling with state law that was actually intended for communities that are much less progressive than we are. And unfortunately, SB 1818 and 65915 specifically have had some impacts that I think were really not intended for communities like West Hollywood, but we have to abide by them anyway. So this is what happens when we have something that is, you know, a building that is 5 stories, which is legally allowable. It's technically by right. I mean, we may not like it, but I'm not allowed to reject a project because I don't like it. It's my job to make sure that we're following the rule of the law. So I subbed in on design review, which is really not the purview of planning, but I'm going to mention this, say it, you know, now what I said then, which is that we don't really have another building like this in West Hollywood. I do think it's exemplary. It's funny, looking at some of the scaling of the, you know, looking at the model, I mean, you know, the biggest building in this, you know, patch of West Hollywood is the towers across the street. So I'm rambling a little bit, but, you know, given kind of what the project is and what we have to consider, I'm in support of the project, and again, it doesn't mean that I'm not open to discussion on the matter, but that's where I stand right now.
Thank you. Adam?
Thank you. I had a couple of things here. On the modification, because it's a discretionary item, I generally feel like we, you know, as I looked to the code, we had to determine, basically the director is instructed, I believe, in the code, and I'm not an attorney, so I might be speaking completely out of turn, but had to determine that there's an insignificant impact on adjacent properties and a hardship exists. And they're making a recommendation that it doesn't, but I'm not hearing much opposition to the modification, which tells me that there might not be a significant impact on adjacent properties. So I'm a little torn on that, on whether we should support the staff's recommendation and not do the modification, but I'll listen to the rest of the commission on that one because that being discretionary, I'm not sure where I stand on that still, even after hearing everything. I went and walked around the neighborhood on Saturday, spent about an hour out there. I'm pretty familiar with it anyway, but I'm excited because it's a bad, like several people mentioned today, it's a bad street presence. I think this will be an improvement generally to the neighborhood. I'm grateful that they're living in a building. I live in an 8-unit building with 2 parking spots for the whole building, built in the 1920s. So I'm particularly sensitive to always making sure we have enough parking. I'm grateful this project has far more than what it's required to have. And one of the reasons I just kind of going off on a couple of my notes here, which aren't in any particular order, I'll get better at this the longer I'm here, I hope. We were told in our packets essentially that these units are vacant. We heard that tonight that that's not the case, and that wasn't what I observed when I was there. So I had some concerns about the people who live there, but I believe that those are well satisfied with the conditions of the resolution, in that rent stabilization and housing concerns have to be addressed for this project to move forward. One of the other things I noticed as I was out there was the traffic. That was the thing that stood out to me in all of the neighborhood comments that really was a concern to me, because I've been in stop-and-go traffic on La Cienega before. But I watched the traffic in the other buildings come in and out of those other buildings, and yes, it was a Saturday, but like I said, I've been there other times. But as I watched even the 11-story building across the street, the traffic coming in and out of there was not so much that I imagine that 23 units are going to have a significant impact at any one particular point in time. Because I was concerned that maybe we incorporate some of the recommendations, like a left turn only on La Cienega, but then I also wonder if we incorporate that, if everyone's just going to go down Hacienda Heights, they'll just make the right and then the right and go down there. So I don't think that that's a solution either, but I'm bringing it up because I want to go on record saying that I looked at all of these things, that I was very concerned about some of these things. And at the end of the day, it's a beautiful building. I think it will be a good addition to our community. The only thing I'm undecided on at this point in time, I'm inclined to support the project, but the only thing I'm undecided on, I want to hear the rest of the commission, is that modification.
Thank you. Lynn?
Well, I too think that this is an exceptional design. I mean, we've recently looked at a lot of square boxes, and this is not a square box. I think it fits in beautifully with the neighborhood. I love the articulation, the landscaping. I live a few blocks away from this area, and well, anyone in West Hollywood knows about our homeless problem, and I don't feel that our homeless problem should be addressed by taking away green space. I think that our green space is very, very precious to us, and certainly to me, and to take away this very creative and open space that we were begging for in some of the other projects, because of the possibility of a homeless problem, I think is using design to solve a social problem. And I think that, yes, that can happen, but in this case, I don't feel that that's the appropriate solution. I very much agree with Commissioner Altschul that this modification is not needed. The design could be reduced a little bit to comply with the law, and I just don't see an overriding reason why we should modify our law, our zoning codes that say this should be a 15-foot setback. I would agree with staff in this, and I would say that the modification should not be permitted. Just a couple of questions and conditions that I would suggest that we put on the project. To be clear, on page 7, it talks about the 36 parking spaces and then the 10 spaces, but then it says there's also 2 handicap accessible spaces. As near as I can tell, that's part of, the 15 single spaces, and it's not an additional 2 spaces?
That is correct.
Okay. I would agree with Commissioner Bass. The left turn problem is serious. This is my route, okay? This is my route east. I live on Westbourne. I go up, and this is my route. This is a couple of my employees take this route. It's gotten worse, much worse. So no left turn. We've talked about this before. I don't know how you enforce it. You can't physically make it happen with bollards and things, and it'd be my preference, but I don't know how physically we could say no left turn, other than a sign which no one will listen to. I do have concerns about, the 2 stories of parking, and in the staff report and in the conditions, they talk about water capture when you go down. I don't know if everyone knows it, but La Cienega translates to the swamp, okay? That is what it means, and that is because there is water. And we had a couple of condos built just half a block from my house, one of which almost went bankrupt because they dug down half a story and found a lake. So this project is going to be digging down 2 stories, and they're going to find a lake, a river running underneath there. And one of my concerns, and I didn't bring this up at commissioner comments, but I think that we're digging down all of our city, and we don't have a good groundwater plan. We don't have a groundwater recapture plan. And the buildings that were built near me are using sump pumps, and they're taking all of that water and they're just pouring it down the storm drains. And I would request that staff look at this issue. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And these big projects, what they're doing is by capturing all that water and throwing it down the storm drain, they're denying that water to all of the plants and trees and everything down the hill from there.
This doesn't really have anything to do with this
Yeah.
particular project, but a comment is appropriate under commissioner comments rather than this.
Right, but this particular project is going to have that exact same issue. So my proposal would be, and you can ask, I don't know if we do a motion, but I think that we, given some of the things that have been said, that we should make some conditions that in these documents to reflect some of the things that have been said but are not in writing, such as that there would be no balconies on the east side, roof deck hours, modifications to the roof deck hours, protection to the neighborhood buildings during construction, and that there would be no further modifications permitted under the city's 10% modification ordinances. And those would be my recommendations.
Okay. Before we actually form a motion, we're going to let another commissioner talk. Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Roger.
So I think this building is a great example of a contemporary building that uses local historical precedents to tailor a project that cultivates urban community both inside and outside its walls. Like La Fontaine, which was built in 1928 and is on Fountain Avenue, it stacks its building to one side and creates a beautiful courtyard that interacts with the public realm. And like La Fontaine, it goes way above the height limit, which creates a beautiful anchor for that intersection and for that street, and therefore sort of almost a guiding post for the community. This building also, like Villa d'Este, which was built in 1927 on Laurel, uses cascading staircase to meet the sidewalk, which immediately interweaves people walking down the street with people walking in and out of the building. It's these very elements that I brought up in our last Planning Commission meeting that I think, when properly used, will help reweave social interaction and a sense of community back into our city. So for those aspects, I applaud this building. I also, Lorcan, want to say congratulations to your team for creating a beautiful set of drawings. It was a pleasure to go through, and your information was properly laid out. I especially appreciate pages 5 through 14 with a project description, where it's clear what your design methodology was and how you came to this building. And you took into, at least as I understand it, you took into consideration view corridors, which you're not required to take into consideration. No one owns their views, but you went out of your way to appease some of the comments that I understand the community made. And I think that's commendable. I also like the fact that you've kind of done a riff of New Museum by Seijima Nishizawa in New York City, and the stacked boxes, and then sort of this graceful veil that comes over the building with the varying degrees of perforations. I think this is going to be a gracious, graceful building on our in our community, and for that reason, I support it.
Thank you. And I'll just make a few brief comments. I was sitting on design review when this building came before us, and I was very excited by the way the architect placed it and used the fact that it's going up a hill anyway, and took and made it part of the, I want to say, landscape as it went up La Cienega. And I think it's going to be a really beautiful building, and I applaud their willingness to work with the neighbors and to try to minimize any negative effect that it would have on the people to the east and to the west of that. I mean, excuse me, to the north. I understand that with the modification that they're asking for something that really doesn't seem justifiable in that sense. But I don't have a strong feeling in opposition to the modification. I do hear that other commissioners do, so I would welcome if someone wants to put that forth in an amendment or as part of the resolution. But I don't think, based on what I heard, I think it makes sense, and I don't think it's more than 10% overall. I would hope that it isn't, and I would ask our department to make sure that that is not, that they don't go beyond that. But I think it's quite a beautiful building. I understand the comments of the public that were concerned about the benches and so forth. And so many projects come before us, and we're asking the architects to design them so that there is some interaction between the front of the building with the pedestrian walkway. Not that everybody walks up La Cienega. It's a big hike. I've done it many times. But at least those who want to and are walking up there, there's some interaction with the community. And the landscaping being open like that, and if you're walking up La Cienega, you could rest on the benches before you continue up the hill. So I thought it was quite lovely that that was included in the design. So I'm prepared to support that, but I'd like to hear from...
Can I make an additional comment?
Yeah.
Because I didn't really get a chance, not that I didn't get a chance, I didn't bring up the setback. You know, one thing to consider here is that in theory, not in theory, in practice, the developer could have come to us with a building that went from, you know, that literally was the envelope that they presented to us, and we'd have a 15-foot setback that went from floor 1 to 5, in theory. And if it was a well-designed box, you'd have one big flat box in the, you know, with a flat, you know, facade in the back on the east side, and it would, you know, there's that consideration. The other consideration is we have this big void that, you know, the applicant, you know, took. They took some, you know, great strides to kind of create this void and create this opening that, in my opinion, is inviting, and it creates this public space that a lot of our projects don't have. I was also encouraged by the fact that the applicant said that, you know, once they get to building and safety, they'll make sure that the average of that setback actually comes out to 15 feet. And given that this was part of a discussion with the neighboring property, I'm inclined to support it because I think it just brings the project, it brings the project together, and it's a fair modification in the context of what they're asking for. So I'm inclined to support it as is for the reasons that I mentioned because, yeah.
I'd like to add also that I'm not good at math, but that the building total is 16,346 square feet. And only approximately 225 square feet of the building is actually encroaching into that 15-foot setback. So it doesn't seem that it's a significant encroachment. That's my view. So I'm prepared to support the modification as part of the proposal.
Commissioner?
Yes.
I did forget one thing. I'm a master gardener, and Mexican feathergrass, which is on their plan, is an invasive species. If staff would like, I have the UC Master Gardener Program blog posting about Mexican feathergrass. It's a highly invasive species, and so I would recommend that the landscape plan not include that.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments before we call for motion? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll try.
Okay, thank you.
I move that the staff recommendation be approved and that the modification be allowed with the condition that it be staged so that the overall modification from south to north or north to south both takes no more or leaves the square footage to the setback as total square footage as is required by the statute. If anybody could say that a little better, please.
Are you trying to say that you wanted to add, the average setback to come out to 15 feet?
No more than 10%, which is required by statute.
Average setback come to the 15 feet.
To the 15 feet.
So that they be allowed to encroach in part and de-encroach in part, which is not a word.
I would second that motion.
And that, thank you. And that there's some of the language in there about what one of the neighbors suggested. Did anybody write that down? Can we have that?
I'm not just making drawings. I'm actually taking copious notes while everybody talks, just for the record. I believe there were 4 conditions for approval. One was for the rear setback, which it sounds like the HOA for the Hacienda building was okay with. In regards to the pivot and articulation on the southeast corner, no balconies on the east side of the building. Privacy, moving the windows, and a privacy film. I believe all of these have been addressed thus far. There was a request for sound mitigation on the rooftop deck, and they also had a request for covering the balconies in the Hacienda building for dust.
And if we can capture all that in the resolution, I think that would be fine.
One second.
I believe there was protection of the neighbors to the south as well.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yes, protection during construction.
Right. Be cleanup and dust protection.
I want to read 2 quick changes in, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lori to finish. With respect to the modification, in the findings on page 3 of 21, finding 2, all the way at the bottom, where it talks about the building can be adjusted to maintain the required 15-foot rear yard setback, I would say the building can be slightly adjusted in order to maintain a required average 15-foot setback, and then that would address your,
Perfect.
in the
Perfect.
findings.
Perfect.
Then in the conditions, 2.3 was originally written to deny the modification. So I'm going to let Lori correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 2.3 can just say the plans shall be revised to grant the modification such that the average setback will be 15 feet. Okay, and then I'm going to let Lori address the other listed issues because she wrote them.
Thank you.
Okay, so as you stated, that the rear setback, the overall average rear yard setback will equal 15 feet. A condition to be added that there shall be no balconies on the east side of the building. There aren't any now, but we'll just condition it.
Just to condition it.
A condition that there should be additional soundproofing during the construction. We can just add that into the construction mitigation, period mitigation plan.
And could we make that to the satisfaction of the director?
That would be condition 5.6. We could add PQRS, a subsection S.
So we could add a condition about noise attenuation on the roof deck.
Are you talking about the noise reduction during construction, or?
I think they were
No,
both addressed by the
was-
public, and I'm comfortable with including them both as conditions for approval if everyone else is.
Yep.
Agree. So both of them should be in
So
there.
the sound mitigation would be added to the construction mitigation plan for construction, and then Lori's suggesting another new condition.
It'd be the hours of operation on the roof deck.
Well, I don't know, do hours of operation apply for residential? I don't think that they do.
It's part of your,
Part of your CCNRs.
Yeah.
But that's not anything
CCNRs.
we can condition as a body, I don't believe.
Yeah, I don't think we can condition that, but can we condition mitigation for sound on the rooftop deck via the design of the project?
Yes.
I know
So-
that the developers made some efforts to put landscaping along that side and set it back a bit so that there is no, there's quite a few distance between that neighbor. But I think maybe they could put some kind of a sound screen also, and also to the south.
Okay, so another condition 12.11 would be the no balconies. 12.12 would be sound mitigation be added on the roof to the satisfaction of the community development director on the, which two sides?
On the south.
South.
And on the south and on the east.
South and east side, okay.
Right? And? North.
Will there be a design review on that?
No.
No.
There
The
should be.
community development director will review it.
Okay, but yeah, there should be some sort of review, because that could significantly alter the elevation. And like you had mentioned, they minimized the roof decks and used landscape to buffer in an effort to already do that. So if we're putting walls up there,
I don't think we're talking about walls, we're talking maybe a glass,
that's a wall.
but it's not, doesn't go for the height, doesn't change the height.
I think we need to be very careful with that.
It's up to
Just
the
as long as
commission
there's
if
a
you feel
design
further
review.
Up to the
mitigation
commission,
is
either we
needed.
can include it or we don't. Stacy, you were the one that,
I mean, do we have to specify via the sound mitigation, like what measures they would need to take?
No.
Does this motion require a direction to staff to bring back a resolution?
Well, what we're trying to do right now is just write it here so you can
Gotten
approve
there.
it tonight. I think at this level, we're comfortable doing that. If we
Okay.
keep making more changes, we might need to bring it back.
I mean, I personally think that there's enough mitigation already, but perhaps we could look at it again at staff level by the director and see whether it needs to have anything more.
So something, it could say, consider adding additional sound mitigation.
How about consider studying the sound mitigation a second or third time to understand that there is enough a sound attenuation on the roof deck that it won't cause an issue for the neighbors? Instead of arbitrarily requiring glass walls or some sort of sound barrier, and we don't even know if there's a problem.
Can I ask who else on the commission would feel comfortable not including the sound mitigation? It sounds like Sue and Rogerio, you're out.
I'm okay with
including with that.
I'm okay with that.
With not including that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, same.
Okay, so we will not add condition 10.12.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 12.12.
Correct.
Need the sound mitigation
During
during
construction.
construction.
Yes. Okay, so right now the changes we have are the change that I read into that finding about the average setback, the change to condition 2.3 to say that the plans will be revised such that to grant the modification with an average setback of 15 feet, to add a provision S to condition 5.6 for construction period noise mitigation, and to add a new condition 12.11, no balconies shall be permitted on the east side of the building. Does that capture everybody's
I think so.
changes? Okay.
No other comments, then let's, one other comment?
Just one quick comment about homelessness. You know, we can't solve the homelessness issue by taking stairs away or by building walls. So I just want the community to understand that we're conscious of that, but from my point of view, social interaction actually helps the situation, not makes the situation worse.
I remember one thing that we haven't talked about as a condition. I don't understand how people are going to be coming out of there, crossing over several lanes of traffic and making a left turn. I really think that we should only, I know that our traffic department has studied this. They don't think that there'd be an issue, but I go on that street all the time, and the idea that somebody's going to cross over the northbound traffic to make a left turn into all the traffic that's coming down from Fountain and from up on Sunset, I don't see how that's possible.
I don't think there's high probability of anybody attempting that during rush hour. I really don't. You'd have to be maybe I'm thinking people in West Hollywood aren't as nice as they are, but I don't. Because I also drive on that street from Fountain onto La Cienega going south almost every day, and I take the same way home at night, and I don't know.
Think anybody's going to try to do it?
Well, I also live on a street where there is a no right-hand turn sign at the top of Laurel, and
Everybody does it.
I think more than one somebody will try to do it. I think lots of somebodies will try to do it.
I also think there are plenty of times of day when you could make a left turn when there's not traffic on the street. I don't feel comfortable conditioning that. I'm in agreement with the staff report on that front.
Okay, thank you. A call for the vote then on the with the conditions that we've imposed.
David. Oh.
And motion passes unanimously as amended. The resolution the Planning Commission just approved memorializes the Commission's final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees.
Thank you. Next item, item 12, new business. There is none. Unfinished business, number 13, there is none. No excluded consent calendar. Next is items from staff. Planning manager's update. Do we have something?
Hi, I have a couple of things. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just taking a look at the upcoming agenda for August 17th, we've got the newly continued item from 8500 Sunset for a CUP for off-site sales of alcohol. We've got commission appointments to subcommittees and task forces. We have a 6-unit condominium building at 1012 Corey, a 3-story 14-unit condominium building at 1041 Spalding, and be reviewing a zone text amendment for electric vehicle charging stations. In addition, a couple of other upcoming items. We had a couple of commissioners mention commission training, especially in response to what the role of the commissioner is in the purview of the commission itself. And staff is working on putting together that training, and it's upcoming at a date to be determined. In addition, along the lines of training as well, on September 5th, there is a boards and commissions training. It's mandatory for all commissioners and board members. The city clerk's office is putting it on, and it's from 6 to 8 p.m. here in the council chambers. It'll be, the subjects are the Brown Act, Code of Conduct, ethics, and other relevant topics to the boards and commissions of West Hollywood.
Sure. In the email that came out about that,
yeah,
after several iterations of the email, it then said that the training was given last year and it needs to be given every 2 years. Was it in fact given last year? Or if it was, then those of us that took it last year don't need to take it for another year.
I don't believe it was. My understanding from the assistant city clerk is that it's mandatory for all boards and commissions, but I suggest you take that question to the city clerk.
Well, I responded to the email and asked that question and got no response back.
Okay, I can find out for you and let you know.
Could you send us an email and let us know whether or not those of us who attended last year actually need to attend? Because I think it is every 2 years.
To clarify,
She said it was every 2 years, and
well,
then she said it was given last year.
And then she said that first it wasn't mandatory and then it was mandatory.
I think the difference is that there's a required ethics training that we can either do live, it was, I believe, offered last year, or online every 2 years, but there's also a required meeting that the city puts on that's general training for people on boards and commissions. I think that's the distinction.
I don't know that that's so.
I
think ethics, obviously, we all agree, is due every 2 years. If it was given last year, those of us that had it don't need it.
There may be additional topics. The Brown Act.
All right, if it's required every 2 years.
It was last year on
2
the Brown
years
Act.
is 2 years.
It was.
Mike did it.
I'm doing it this year.
Oh, then we should just come to support.
Oh, well, then we all need to go.
Well, obviously we have to come.
Okay, well, we'll clarify that.
Yes.
So so that we're all on the same page on that. It would be important. Okay, anything else on manager's update? No? Any public comment at this time?
Yes, we have one. Joyce.
Thank you, Joyce.
I did specifically rearrange my schedule for 8500 Sunset. So just in case I can't be there, I do want to address, I'm going to try to be here, but we don't need more liquor on Sunset. We've got too many people walking up and down, and if they can just freely go buy liquor and walk down the street or go to the view corridor and drink, if you do approve this, this business needs to validate the parking, because I live at Fountain View and we have parking outside right across, and we haven't found a way to control it. And that means they'll come and park in our parking and walk across the street, go get their liquor, and perhaps sit at Fountain View in our La Cienega driveway and get drunk. And then we're going to have a problem that we're going to have to come back. So if ever this is to happen, they have to validate parking for their customers and not make them, because no one's going to pay $10 for parking if they can just park in our parking for free and hope they don't get caught. And I have a concern, if this business fails, that property has been issued a liquor license. And what's going to go in there afterwards? Is it going to be a crazy place that sells all kinds of liquor that creates something that is not copacetic with the neighborhood? So I'm going to urge you now, and I'm going to urge you, if I can be here, to not allow more liquor on Sunset. Right now, at least people have to sit down and pay for a meal and compensate with food, but this is just go in, buy a bottle. And how many people come to Sunset Boulevard and just go up and down the street? And then you got the Comedy Store people coming out, and you also need to restrict the hours that liquor can be sold. This can't be, if they want liquor bad enough, just drive down the block a little bit further and go to Turner's. Why do we have to? I grew up in Chicago where every street, neighborhood street, had a liquor store or a bar. And I know how many drunken people came into our neighborhood or were walking down our streets as a result, and they just will come to us, and we have enough trouble on Fountain and enough trouble on Sunset that we don't need more liquor stores. Please don't let that happen. And I hope I'll come back and say this all over again, but if I can't, I did get the notice, and so I was here, so I don't think I'm being unfair bringing this up, because I've stayed the whole meeting to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay then, any items from commissioners?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Alschel.
Congratulations to Sue and to Stacy on being the new chair and the vice chair. I can't recall in all these years that there's ever been two women in those positions at the same time.
I know.
So this is a milestone. And to David, who did a magnificent job as chair of the commission for the whole past year, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to second that, actually, just thanking David and Sue. You're not vice chair anymore, but congratulating you. And David, you've been such a masterful kind of consensus builder, and it's big shoes to fill, but I know Sue will do a great job. So I'm looking forward to serving with all of you, and I'm just very happy to be here.
Thank you.
I have one more.
You want to make another comment? Okay.
One more comment.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Jean Dobrin spent about 12 days in Cedars and just yesterday moved to Beverly Hills Rehab, where hopefully she's well on the way to a complete recovery of her former problem.
Oh dear.
Thank you.
I would also like to say thank you, David. Being a new commissioner, you kind of showed us how to do it and how to run a good meeting, and I really appreciate your role model. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate very much the way you managed the meeting and how you brought us together and your comments. I really appreciate them, so hope I can do as well as you this year. Thank you. Not hearing any other items from Commissioner, I move to, we're going to adjourn the meeting to our next regularly scheduled meeting on Thursday of July 17, 2017.
August.
Oh, excuse me, I'm already in September, sorry about that. August 17th, 2017, at 6:30 p.m. here in these chambers. I look forward to having members of the public come and speak with us. Thank you.
So I will see you Monday morning? Yes. How nice.